All right, joining us here in the Syngenta tent now is Bruce Battles, crop specialist for Syngenta. How you doing?
Great, good to be here.
You're talking insect management. You know, we've talked so much this year about drought and those conditions that maybe we haven't talked as much about insect pressures. Let's kind of go back and review what kind of year it's been. I know there's been especially a lot of concern for those that corn on corn.
Definitely. That's when we think about insect pressure, that's probably the most common when we think about rootworm management in general, and that's where we get most of the questions at, I think. But there's a lot more than just rootworm out there as an issue. Looking at a lot of fields and gathering ears for the show here this week, there's a lot of ear damage too. Corn earworm, for example, has caused pretty extensive damage, and we're seeing some big differences contributed to Agasure viptera and that earworm protection we're getting out of the end. And it's not really as much about the insect causing physical damage and causing grain losses as more the mycotoxins are developing as the aftermath of that little bit of damage.
A lot of concern about that now. You know, saying earlier, the things you learn in a drought year that you wish you didn't have to go through, but you do learn some things. What has stood out this year in the drought year about insect management?
Well, I mean, I think back to the rootworm management, it's a big issue. Rootworm can be a really devastating pest in any year, but when you take that root mass away in a lot of really good years, it can compensate for that from a yield loss perspective. This year, I think we're going to see more severe yield penalties due to poor rootworm management or less rootworm management practices, and so that's where we're really talking a lot about more of a comprehensive approach to managing all insect pressure across the board, whether that be ear damage from something like corn earworm to managing rootworms, and I think we're going to have to be more diverse than just looking at a single trait maybe as an answer for that rootworm management issue. Looking at dual modes of action traits like our Agasure 3122 or pipeline traits that are coming through our registration process right now like Agasure Duracade with new modes of action, or maybe even just looking at other ways to manage rootworm through force insecticide granular on top of a trait hybrid, or even controlling beetles through a warrior insecticide that can reduce the egg laying capacity for future years. And when you start to compile all those together, which Syngenta is probably one of the only people that can look at their portfolio and put them together, you can really take a comprehensive approach and manage from year to year more effectively.
What we've seen in a year like this is your margin for error is really reduced. I mean, as you said, some years you get away with some things because it's such a good year and the crop's producing so well, but a year like this you couldn't.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, the margin error is going to show up when the combine runs through the field, obviously, but there's areas of the state here where we're witnessing that the margin of error might have been around standability. There's some down corn, some areas due to maybe a little more relaxed approach to rootworm management in those areas, and so they're going to not only be harvesting lower yields in those fields, but it's going to take them longer to do it because they're trying to pick corn off the ground.
So there will be some very important, as always, but even more so I think coming out of this year, management decisions to be made going into next year.
Definitely. I think this is a great time to be managing that. I mean, we can still go out and look at fields and get a good feel for what kind of control we got this year. Probably see a lot of rootworm beetles in some of those high pressure fields and get a good feel. Is this a field I need to really take a more intensive management approach up next year? Or is this a field that's a 50-50 corn rotation that I'm not going to be as concerned about rootworm management maybe?
Let's go back to corn on corn and the challenges that producers have there, especially with insect management.
Well, the biggest really revolves around I think mostly contributed to the corn on corn acres that we're seeing the issues, right? There's been the practice up to this point, popular practice has been to use a single mode of action traded hybrid. And we've gotten by in a lot of cases over a lot of years to that, and it's simple and convenient and easy to do, right? And so, but we're quickly learning that simple and convenient may not be the right way always. There was a recent papers published by Iowa State, the first cases of field level resistance to it, to a rootworm trait in the marketplace, and so it's really got us thinking about how we have to start looking more comprehensively at delaying the onset of resistance and protecting the traits that we have right now that aren't resistant. And so I think those are all things we have to consider going forward.
Is it tempting in a year like this maybe to just say, oh, you know, everything was down because of the drought and overlook some of those insect management decisions that maybe could have been better?
It's going to be real easy to harvest a field and not really look closely at it and understand what you had in there. So I mean, I do think it's worth investigating a little bit more why you have the yields you're seeing in your area, certain areas. There's going to be a lot of corn where there's just severe stress, right? And you had the root system fully developed underneath it, and it just didn't yield. But there's going to be other areas that you may have standing corn that's not lodged or anything, but had extensive root damage. But being a shorter plant due to drought stress, that yield penalty was emphasized more. So I encourage our growers to really spend a lot of time looking at their fields and basing on next year what do we need to do differently.
And you talked about the comprehensive approach, more than just a single focus. I think that management style is going to become more and more the norm, isn't it, for agriculture moving forward?
Definitely is. I mean, the stakes are much higher, right? Especially, today we're looking at $7 to $8 corn. The stakes are really, really high, right? But even if we backtrack into more normal $4 or $5 corn, the stakes are tremendously high, and it doesn't take many bushels to pay for those management practices that are out there either as well. So there may be some sticker shock on the front side, but once you really do the pencil into the math, to those technologies that you're looking at employing, you can put a couple of them together and still get really good return on your investment.
So let's talk again about some of the products you mentioned from Syngenta that will help farmers with their insect management. Let's talk about the tools in your toolbox that you offer.
So start maybe looking at above ground pests. I think one of the biggest management tools we have is our Agrosure Viptera trait. So we broad spectrum of control across a wide variety, the most insects on the marketplace that we can control above ground. So that speaks for itself. We also have, from a foliar insecticide standpoint, Warrior 2 with Xeon protection, and so that's a great follow-up again to control some of these other pests that maybe Viptera is not controlling. Control some of those adult rootworm beetles before they're laying eggs as well. And then when you move more into rootworm management or below ground, obviously we have the Agrosure 3000 GTs, which is a single mode of action trait that still works very successfully across a lot of acres. But as you get into those more higher pressure situations, we're looking at overlaying a force insecticide on top of that. And we have both a granular and a liquid formulation of that. So we got a couple options there with a long-term proven control. And then beyond that, we're quickly evolving from a trait perspective from those single mode of action traits to dual mode of action. So Agrosure 3122 gives us 2 modes of action from a rootworm trait perspective, and also gives us a reduced refuge. So Agrosure Easy Refuge enables us to do a 5% reduced refuge in the bag refuge. And then we're really excited here in the next couple of years, we're going to be launching Agrosure Duracade, which is just a step change in performance from a rootworm management perspective.
So there's more in the pipeline coming.
Exactly, more to come.
Hey, real quick, what were the biggest insect pressures you've seen throughout Iowa this year?
Throughout Iowa, rootworm obviously I think trumps everything. Western Iowa, I've seen a lot of corn earworm pressure. You can really sort out the traits and the trait providers based on whether they had tolerance to that or not, and almost pick what companies out there based on the earworm damage there.
Bruce, good to see you again. Thanks.
Thanks for your time.